America today is run by a Federal Reserve System. This was made to oversee and regulate banks, giving them loans that they need them. They also manage how much money is in circulation. There are 12 regional banks in the U.S. This wasn't always the case, however. The formation of the centralized banks started with Hamilton in 1791. This Bank of the United States was only to be dominated by big businesses and other big interests. So when the vote came to renew the central bank system Hamilton created during the year 1811, it was shut down. Regardless, this was not the last time our country would test the waters with a centralized bank. In the year 1816, the U.S. Congress pushed the idea of a centralized bank system, and with success, they made the second Bank of the United States. This second bank would be short-lived because of the beloved Andrew Jackson being elected president in 1828. With his campaign, he vowed that he would bring an end to the second Bank of the United States, and when the bank was voted on to be renewed, it did not make the cut. The following almost 30 years would be called the free banking era. Now this might sound appealing because it's all free and hey, laissez-faire, and no government interference. What could go wrong?
Everything.
During the next 30 years, many found it difficult to obtain jobs or to get money. Everyone was affected by this. The working class, the middle class, and even the high class. This was a time when there was no centralized form of currency. So just imagine Massachusetts having their own form of currency and the other 49 states having their own form of currency under no central bank. This would mean that every 50 states would differ in the amount of value their currency had. This was the type of confusion that took place during the free banking era. This all stopped during 1863 when the National Banking Act was introduced. This was passed to provide a national uniform currency for the United States. This act provided the U.S. with banks that had banknotes backed up by the U.S. government. Now, you might be thinking, well, this is great. Let's go National Banking Act. Everything should be fine now. No, wrong. In 1907, many stock investors used speculation to quickly create a profit in the stock market, which ended in utter destruction. The stock market started decreasing fast, and this created a banking panic, and this ended up in the public yearning for reform in the banking system. Thus, in 1913, after many tribulations like the Aldrich-Vorland Act of 1908, then Wilson shutting down the act once he was elected president in 1912, the federal government reserve system was born. Well, surely everything will be fine now, right? Nope, wrong again. Remember in the beginning of the video when I said that the Federal Reserve would manage how much money would be in circulation? They did this through monetary policies. When the government wanted more consumers to invest and buy, they would simply buy government bonds, which in turn increased how much money was in circulation and lowered interest rates. This also increased employment, and this was called expansionary monetary policy. In contrast, the contractionary monetary policy would slow down the progression of the economy and help lower deficit spending, which lowered inflation. Now, this would be done similar to the expansionary monetary policy in that instead they are selling government bonds, which effectively made the circulation of money decrease and made interest rates go up, causing there to be less buying and investing by consumers. In these ways, the US was very much in control of their market economy. So why not just constantly implement the expansionary monetary policy if it increases employment and makes the consumers want to buy more? Well, I'll tell you. Let me give you this little scenario. There's a country whose businesses have overproduced so much that their businesses no longer needs their workers. So what do? They fire them. The workers, being unemployed but still financially responsible, still have installment plans and loans that they need to pay back to the banks. Some workers even use these loans to buy stocks on margin, which is a form of investing in stocks. That means that you would put down a small down payment and then loan the rest of the money. But with no job, how will they pay back the banks? The simple answer is that they just don't. This was a problem that led to the Great Depression, along with other causes and catalysts like the stock market crash. The Federal Reserve was persistent in allowing Americans to buy and to invest using loans. So with there being a low interest rate, that's exactly what they did. Many lost houses, lands, and automobiles because they had used them as a collateral when setting up their loans. This was normally called a default, which simply meant that they just could not pay up on their loan, so the bank took their collateral. And a little side note, a collateral is a type of promise you make to a bank when loaning that you will fully pay off the loan, and in return, the bank will own your collateral. Until you pay it off, of course. This was also used during buying stocks on margins, where the loans you would put down would normally be backed up by a collateral. With this big disaster, everyone lost loads of money, and the stocks flatlined, and everyone ran to the banks to close accounts. This was called the bank runs. With so many people trying to get their money back, the only problem was that the stock market used to be so good that even the banks tried to have their fair share in trying to obtain a quick buck. Banks had used money from their customers' accounts to invest it in the stock market. So when the stock market crashed, the banks lost all that money. Because of this and the fact that everyone was closing accounts, over 1,000 banks shut down after October 29, 1929. The Great Depression officially ended in 1939. And I know what you're thinking. This was the worst thing that could ever happen in US history. Surely it can't happen again in maybe 2007? Nope, wrong. In 2007, there was a subprime mortgage crisis. Now, a mortgage by itself is defined as a type of loan to obtain a house or a property. A subprime mortgage was the mortgage that was given to those that particularly did not have good financial stability. Banks had learned after the Great Depression not to give out mortgages to those that couldn't afford them. But another thing that took place during the 2007 economy was an extraordinary market for housing. With tons of people buying houses, buying a house would be a great way to get money quickly. Well, that's what everyone thought. Even people with bad credit were receiving loans from banks using the subprime mortgages, and they continued to mortgage houses, even though they might not be able to pay them back. Though later in 2007 there was a sudden drop in the demand for housing, and when there is a little demand, the price will also begin to be little. With no one buying houses, those who took out subprime mortgages now found themselves in crippling debt, and their houses were being foreclosed. Banks weren't being paid back for their loans that they offered, and that further hurt the economy. With all this money lost, the average American stopped spending as much, which further crippled the economy. This got so bad that the American government had to step in to help in 2008.